several years ago. PJ mentioned it. We had put together a group of retail fertilizer folks, as well as some agriculture producers, and began talking about these issues several years ago already. This is a terribly complicated problem. We thought that water quantity was going to be the biggest problem that we faced here. That's nothing compared to this issue that we got going on right now. And I'm not saying this because it cannot be overcome. I'm saying it because there's so many other things that are happening at the same time. The issue becomes so complex. We have different soil types, different irrigation types. We've got several different things happening out there that are not all the same. And when you're trying to make either some kind of a program or even some kind of a rule where we all are trying to be treated fairly and in the same type of situation, that becomes very hard. And we had actually put into the rules and regulations several years ago, some regulations that were supposed to deal with this. But after we began to look at them and talk about them, we felt like we need to have more time. We need to have more information. So that's what we did. We put a 2-year study together, which some would say 2 years isn't near enough for this type of problem. But that's the length that we did choose. And we started sampling water, groundwater, every spring and every fall at the exact same time. Several reasons why. One, we wanted to prove up to ourselves that whatever nitrates that you show in your own groundwater, are they there in the spring? And is that same level there in the fall? Does something change? We all know that we have a very unique system here. We have lots of water coming in, fresh water. We have that water that's infiltrating the aquifer. And we know that there's some flushing effect every year. But we also have seen we may flush some out, but then there's some more that return. So, thinking about this, we began to think about what can we do? What can we do to help mitigate the problem? We know that we're getting the flushing. So how do we get the problem to be that we're not dealing with that new contamination coming in every year? Well, what it boils down to, I think, we're still talking these things over, but it all comes down to best management practices. So whether it's split application, use of biologicals, whatever it is, we need to look at incorporating some of those best management practices into our culture. This is all about a cultural shift, in my mind. And we have done a lot of that over the last 2 decades. We begun to think differently than Dad. We started to think differently, for sure, than Grandpa did. We have a ton of technology out there, and we just need to really focus on what would be the best way to tackle this problem. So, the NRD, we've been working with other agencies or sister agencies, trying to look at different ways how to combat nitrates in groundwater. But as we found out, as we moved from 5 years ago to today, the topic of nitrates in groundwater has become way more important. If you think about some of the things that you saw through the media, you probably picked it up or logged into some other news source over the last year, but more than likely you ran into one of these headlines. This is the public outcry we're facing. It's what we're hearing when it comes to groundwater quality in Nebraska. The message has been heard loud and clear by the board of directors and the staff in the district. The new target is nitrates. For the next few minutes, you're traveling the water quality path of this district with me. getting a glimpse into where we've been and witnessing the vision of where we're going. They've already been given the authority to do what they need to do, and they're not doing it. Tim Greger, former Republican State Senator, representing District 40. Yet the regulators themselves are far less blameless than Tim Greger, former Republican State Senator. Greger once worked for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which helped farmers with soil health. He sat on the legislature's Natural Resource Committee and authored new laws, one that created a task force that studied nitrate and another that strengthened nitrate education. He doesn't mince words on Nebraska's natural resources districts. And with all that being said, the former state senator does make somewhat of a valid point. NRDs are granted the authorities to regulate nitrate contamination in groundwater, but the problem is much more complex than that. It's much more complex than just writing and enforcing a set of rules. The NRDs are not the only agency in the state that has the authority to regulate groundwater pollution. The Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy has the authority to regulate groundwater point source pollution, which would include monitoring and regulating livestock waste, which can have an impact on nitrates in groundwater as well. The NRDs across the state are well aware of the potential costs of nitrates in groundwater, whether it's the actual cost to the ratepayer of a community that was required to treat their water, or it could be much more serious, the cost of our health. The pediatric cancer rate is one of the largest outcries from the residents of the state. The correlation between cancer rates and nitrate levels is incredible. The public is speaking, and we as regulators and producers need to listen to what they're saying. We all know someone who is dealing with cancer, and we do not want to dismiss any concerns about how that cancer originated, but we do need to be very careful about blame. Some of this research that is attempting to correlate certain types of cancers with nitrates is still inconclusive. There are health concerns. The medical field is comfortable in relating those concerns to nitrate levels in groundwater, and there are health concerns that will require much more research to be completed. If not careful, using those bold statements and creating bold headlines without this evidence could cripple an entire industry. Can you imagine what this district would look like without production agriculture? We have no manufacturing. We don't make tires, we don't make cars, or computer chips. But what we do make here is food. We must do all we can to protect our natural resources from contamination, to preserve our way of life. In the next few slides, I'm going to provide some information for thought. Some of that information will set you back and really make you think. This information is already out in the public without disclaimer or caveat. I find that very problematic. The only purpose of showing this to you today is for you all to see the information that is already being shared, as well as giving you the opportunity to make up your own mind when it comes to this topic. The quote on the screen is from a father who lost his son to lymphoma. Recently, Gary Peters addressed the crowd at the Aurora High School football game. And the following is a story describing the event. The Adams Central Patriots High School played an away game against the Aurora Huskies. It was Childhood Cancer Awareness Night. Gary Peters, an Aurora father who lost his son Jacob to lymphoma in 2011, walked onto the field to read out one name after another. Stand up if you knew Alyssa Sandmeyer. Stand up if you knew Tyler Larson. Stand up if you knew Jacob Peters. And stand up if you knew Sidney Owens. By the end, almost everyone in the stadium was standing. All were children, including Peter's son Jacob, died of childhood cancer. To him, the 7 pediatric cancer cases in Aurora from 2005 to 13 seemed like a waterfall of different cancer diagnoses out of nowhere. As you make a visual comparison of the maps, you begin to see the correlation. This will make you sit back and begin to contemplate if there truly is a connection. I will freely admit that I don't possess a PhD or am I a researcher. But I don't think it takes any of those letters in a title to see somewhat of a connection. I would say that there is certainly more research that needs to be done. What it boils down to is we all have questions when it comes to such an emotional topic. It's awfully hard to dismiss a concern from someone who lost a child to cancer. But in all fairness, we do need more information. The emotion needs to be separated from the task at hand, and that can be quite difficult to do. All of us want to know if a connection exists. As ag producers, none of us want to be connected to something as awful as childhood cancer. When you look at a map of the district, you begin to see the widespread issue of nitrate contamination in groundwater. Each dot represents a dedicated monitoring well. The color associated represents the level of contamination. Dots in green are from 0 to 4.99 parts per million. Dots in orange are between 5 and 9.99 parts per million, and dots in red are 10 parts per million and over. Out of the 519 wells represented on this map, 50% of those wells have a nitrate level exceeding 5 parts per million. If you think back to the map of the previous slide, take a mental note of Scottsbluff County. As an example, a vast number of the wells in Scottsbluff County currently show nitrate levels over 5 parts per million. The connection that the previous map was making was if your average nitrate levels by county is greater than 5 parts per million, there's a likelihood that your pediatric cancer rate is above average as well. Again, there's a ton of research that needs to happen before the dirty end of the stick can be pointed in the direction of production agriculture. But in the best interest of our natural resources and the agriculture industry, we need to be prepared and proactive. We simply cannot ignore as important as a health issue over children. There is undeniable evidence that blue baby syndrome, which is a rare disorder that affects newborns, in which reduces oxygen in the blood, is directly related to nitrate-contaminated drinking water. We've known that for decades. That health issue has been heavy on the minds of this district. And knowing that there are potential other types of diseases that could be related to high nitrate levels would be too terrible to contemplate. The pie chart provides a breakdown of how many wells are associated with what level of contamination. In red, 22% of the wells sampled are above the maximum contaminant level of 10 parts per million set by EPA. In yellow, 28% are uncontaminated but above 5. And the section in green represents 50% of the wells sampled, which are 5 parts per million or less. As you think about the pie chart, one thought that comes to my mind are how many wells sampled that are over 10 are located near or in municipal wellhead protection areas. When you have a contaminant plume in the aquifer, the plume will move the direction of the water flow in the aquifer. The concern then becomes the location of the municipal well field to the proximity of the contamination. Most communities in this district have relocated their well fields and would make known to everyone the difficulties of securing a reliable well for both quantity and quality. We need to do all we can to protect those water sources. Thousands of people rely on what that well field produces daily and want water that is contaminant-free. When a well reaches 28 parts per million, reverse osmosis will not bring that nitrate level down below 10. That level is set by MC, maximum contaminant level, and that's set by EPA, and considered no longer safe by their standards. So what happens when treating the water is no longer an option? The only option exists is looking for a new water source. But what if that water source doesn't exist? Treating water is expensive and wasteful. It's not uncommon for a city that is treating water to use a 30% waste calculation. Some small communities will discharge as much as 40,000 to 50,000 gallons a day of water each day. I recently saw a statistic that the state funded roughly $49 million in water projects last year, benefiting only 18,000 people. It's imperative that we do all we can to protect our drinking water for not only us, but our future generation as well. We can't ignore the private well owner. The contamination risk and cost are just as real to them. The only difference is they can't spread the cost of treating the water or exploring for a new well field with other ratepayers. Currently, we do all we can to help those private well owners monitor their wells for contaminants by sampling and sending those samples in other well water. If contamination does occur, the options begin to be limited. The Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy has a program currently to help the private well owner treat the water with an RO system. But other than that, if the need is to look for a new source, that burden now falls on that property owner. If the contamination is nitrates or some other man-made problem, the issue can become very frustrating to the property owner due to them feeling out of control with the situation. And in the end can be a tremendously large burden for that property owner that he didn't ask for. 2 of the 12 statutory responsibilities highlighted here are directly tied to water quality. It is our duty to protect the water supply for any beneficial use, as well as manage and conserve groundwater and surface water. The 12 charges listed we take very seriously. And when it comes to using regulatory authority, that decision is not taken lightly. The board of directors and staff weigh each decision carefully and take into consideration how that regulation will affect people's lives and their livelihoods. When it comes down to the water quality issue, it becomes even more difficult because now the consideration revolves around other conditions like public health concerns, contamination, migration, how it's monitored and how it's mitigated. Plus, the consideration still somewhat hinges on how regulations affect the lives of the residents and their livelihoods. The directors and the staff are residents here as well. So any decision made by this district also affects us here at the North Platte NRD. We are your neighbors and your friends. We share the same water supply you do. So those decisions that are being made are under the utmost scrutiny and carefully considered before they're put into action. And at the end of the day, we all live here and must operate under the same regulation. How does that authority work? NRDs in the state have the authority to regulate non-point source pollution. The Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy has the authority to regulate point source pollution. Both the Nebraska Department of Natural Resources and the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy have the oversight authority to monitor and act upon contaminant issues in each NRD district. If the need for regulation is required, the decision is weighed very carefully. The process exists that if the public disagrees with the policies proposed by the district, the opportunity to be heard is available through the public hearing process. No regulation is passed without the opportunity for the public to be heard. Regarding groundwater quality, if we ignore our statutory responsibilities of protecting the resource, we know and understand that someone else will step in and take over. Would we rather have district control made up of someone from Lincoln or your locally elected board made up of your friends and your neighbors setting policy in the district? Neither the board of directors nor the staff of the North Platte NRD relishes the idea of creating new rules and regulations. I found this article interesting in its attempt to explain the groundwater quality phase system that all NRDs currently have in place. This example does give an overview of what the regulatory steps and progression is through the phase process. But what the author was trying to get at with this article was in the first 3 phases, nothing was done to limit nitrogen application. Only if a phase 4 level is implemented into their groundwater management plan will the allowance for limiting nitrogen applications be an option. The point being made was that the phase system was inadequate. And this author's opinion is that regulation of nitrogen application should occur earlier in the phase system. But what the author isn't considering is the complexity of the issue. As it's implemented from one district to another, what may work as a control in one area of the state may not be practical somewhere else. The North Platte NRD currently has a 3-phase system, with controls and triggers being somewhat different than other NRDs. The district does have a sub-management area along the North Platte River corridor from the Lamoille County line to the Keith County line. And that area is currently in phase level 2. The remainder of the district is currently in a phase level 1. Currently, both those areas and phase levels are in review. Some NRDs have begun to implement a phase 4 level into their regulations. This phase 4 declaration, if made, is where the regulation becomes very onerous for the producer. And phase 4 yield goals are no longer determined by the producer, they are determined by the NRD, using your 5-year average. If that average contains a hail year, I guess that's too bad. The NRD district will now make recommendation on how much fertilizer is applied. And fertilizer receipts will be turned into the NRD annually with the crop production report verifying that with the district. I can assure you, there is no one on the board of directors or staff that would want to have that responsibility to implement or enforce. So let's do all we can to eliminate the need for this phase level in the future, and we can do this together. And I'll explain how in just a few more slides. Is there good news? Absolutely. The good news is that 1.1 million acre feet of clean, clear mountain water enters this NRD district annually. Of that 1.1 million acre feet, an average of 450,000 acre feet is infiltrating our aquifer system, creating a contamination pollution effect. This is what makes this district unique and will make a huge difference in achieving our water quality goal. What to take from this slide is that through our sampling regimen, we've begun to create a historical data set that demonstrates the quality of our surface water. Any sample shown in this slide that is marked with an ND, that is a sample that had no detection of nitrates in it. The three largest surface water irrigation districts all have very low to non-detect samples. Those districts provide over 75% of the water quantity and quality benefits we experience from aquifer recharge. So much has happened in the last 10 years when it comes to managing irrigation and crop inputs. Laws have been passed to implement programs with state dollars to assist landowners in bettering their soil health, increasing irrigation efficiencies, as well as providing dollars to help individual NRDs combat aquifer decline. The private industry is making leaps and bounds assisting producers, monitoring capabilities in both irrigation quantity and most recently, some really good technology has been introduced to assist producers in monitoring the nutrients in real time. These programs will assist the producer in scheduling their next nitrogen application. Feeding the plant as it needs it can not only prevent nitrogen loss, but also increase producer margins by decreasing the instances of over-application. I'm certain you're all wondering what a new set of regulations will look like, how that will impact your operation. You may have begun to hear rumors of what a terrible set of rules this NRD has in store for its producers. You may have also heard that the intention of these new rules is to end corn production in this district. But today I tell you the truth. And the truth is, there is a set of draft rules that is under discussion. But to be honest with you, currently those rules are nothing but a draft and are far from being final. What you will likely see in this set of rules is regulations based in industry-accepted science and practicality. No one representing this district wants to make rules to just make rules. Any rule implemented must have a positive effect on water quantity or water quality with the least amount of impact to the producer. The board and the staff are fully prepared to combat the nitrate issue, but we're going to need your help. To further expand on what to possibly expect, the regulations you can see will not only apply to groundwater and communal irrigators, will also apply to surface water-only irrigators. The purpose being that the contamination risk does not only apply to a groundwater or communal irrigator. The risk applies to anyone applying nitrogen and irrigating. More than likely, you may see some requirements of crop production record keeping, as well as soil sampling. This will probably be nothing new to your operation. There will be some flexibility built into these rules. Not every farm is the same. Soil types vary, irrigation methods vary. You can't fit every operation into one box. It just doesn't work. Again, to reiterate, this flexibility would be built around science. To boil it down further, any new set of rules will revolve around best management practices. Today you heard from one of the industry's leading experts on crop production. Brian spent all morning discussing with us the importance of implementing those practices when it comes to managing nutrients. His main reasoning for implementing those practices that reduce leaching is to save dollars and increase your profit margin. If that is the only reason you look at incorporating those practices into your operation, that's okay. When you get down to the nuts and bolts of the problem, the end goal is the same. If you are successful in eliminating nitrogen leaching and as a result save money, you have also saved the aquifer. We all win. What to expect from the district? You'll see us searching out both public and private dollars to assist you in adopting those practices. Whether it's through cost share or other funding opportunities, you'll see that we have an obligation to all of you in helping you adopt those practices with the least amount of financial burden on your operation as possible. You'll have the North Platte NRD and our partners to use as an educational resource or as a sounding board for your ideas. Combating this problem isn't all about the NRD making a rule and then we beat you over the head with it. It's about creating a partnership between the North Platte NRD and our ag producers to cooperatively work towards the same goal. The groundwater irrigators did it when they tackled the problem of water quantity. You put your shoulder into the problem, and that's been successful. It wasn't easy in the beginning, and this won't be easy either. But if we work together in the same way we did, those goals can be achieved together as well. To wrap up, I want to provide to you an explanation of what you can expect from me. I'm a firm believer in preserving our agriculture industry and our way of life. I've been a farmer all of my life. My parents and grandparents were farmers all of their lives as well. Our family story is no different than many of yours. My parents and grandparents dedicated their lives to ensuring the success of the operations they were building for the next generation to come. My commitment to you is this: I will do everything I can to ensure production agriculture remains viable here for years to come. But as ag producers and as regulators, we must take our responsibility as stewards of land seriously and do everything we can to protect our natural resources. If we fail that task, we fail the generations to follow. Little story. Recently, my mom and my brothers and I had the opportunity to partner up and purchase a farm that borders our family farm on the west. And I'll tell you, with the price of farmland these days, just coming up with a down payment is really tough. It was a good thing there was four of us in this partnership, because it gave us more sock drawers and more couch cushions to look for money. But if you think about it, as we got closer to the closing date, we would all get together by Zoom and talk through a few things from time to time. One afternoon we were discussing a few things, and my mom asks, how much is that payment going to be? How much is the interest? How long is the term? And she sat back and she says, boys, I'm going to be 87 years old. And at that time, I was just waiting for some good old wise words of wisdom. And this is what she said to us. She said, good luck with that. What the heck kind of words of wisdom was that? We hadn't been partners for more than 30 days and already had a partner to get out. Honestly, when I thought about it more, what the heck were we thinking? Unless we win the lottery, the last payment will be made when I'm 85 years old. My older brother will be 95 years old. What were we thinking? After Mom gave us her words of wisdom, my brothers and I made a pact. Even though I'll be 85 and my older brother 95, my younger brother 83, we decided that when the last payment is made, we're going to go have a mortgage burning celebration on the farm, if we know where it's at. Why did I tell you this story? It wasn't to tell you that we all bought the farm. It was to tell you that even though there are some really tough decisions that we're going to have to be made soon, I'm still a believer in the future of agriculture in this district. If I thought we were on the verge of a natural resource regulatory turndown, I sure wouldn't have tied myself into a financial commitment until I'm 85. There are some changes that are going to have to be made in our operations as we manage our nitrogen. We can't bury our head in the sand and just hope that this will all go away. The pressure is too great from the residents of the state that expect production agriculture to do something about the problem. If we do ignore it, the chance that our local control will last is unlikely. There's no better way to work on a local problem than with those who live here. We know what's best for us, not someone from Lincoln or Washington. As we move forward in our discussions, some old ideas will get put to the side and new ideas will take their place. I know there are some of you that may have questions or concerns as more of this nutrient management plan evolves. I want you all to know that my office door is always open to hear your ideas or concerns. I have 2 phones to receive your calls and discuss your apprehensions, 1 for each hand. But when it comes to complaints, I only have 1 ass, so you're all going to have to take turns kicking it. It may not seem like that, but I, my staff, and this board of directors are in your corner. And if we work at this problem together, we can improve the quality of our water, and at the same time, improve the quality of our lives in the district, as well as the quality of life for future generations to come. I want to thank you for coming today. I hope you found the day informative and well worth your time. I would take any questions you may have. If you have anything for me. Sure.
Seems like the nitrate information is right now. Say we call that, what's the next thing?
I'd like to tell you that there isn't anything to work on. I'd like to say that 15 years ago we could have thought that water quantity was going to be the last issue that we were going to face.
The reason I ask that is because it's all humidity gas.
Well, a lot of things can be solved when you're dealing with best management practices. You know, whether it's you're looking at atrazine or other types of chemicals that the state monitors. Best management practices go a long way. So if those are incorporated to deal with the nitrate problem, you deal with some of those other problems as well. So I'd love to be able to say to you that there is nothing else coming down the pipeline. But right now, this district has a statutory responsibility to protect and maintain the quality of groundwater we have. And that wasn't much of an answer. Any other questions for me?
So there's one came in. How much does well water static level depth correlate to nitrates, deeper versus shallow?
So when you're thinking about nitrate levels in groundwater, if you live in Box Butte County, maybe that's an example. We may know that there's nitrates that are leaching, but the aquifer being hundreds of feet deep, that nitrate isn't a concern. If you live in the alluvial valley here, nitrates are a concern because there are places in the district where we're only 6 feet to groundwater. We have a perfect storm going on here over the past 2 or 3 decades where shallow groundwater depths and sandy soils really made for the perfect storm. And the biggest contamination in our district is where these situations occurred. So correlation between depth of groundwater and nitrates, yes, there is a definite correlation there. It's all about how quickly those nitrates are migrating through your soil. Any other questions for me?
Is the NRD considering assisting with soil testing in those sensitive areas?
Good question. So the question was, is the NRD is considering assisting in soil sampling and soil testing? We do have a pilot program going on right now where we are cost sharing on soil samples. We've had some great interest in that program. Lots of samples have come in. We had written a grant to the Nebraska Environmental Trust and received some money from those folks and then put in a few dollars of our own and do have a program currently going on. That is something that we are going to be considering as we move forward, carry through this whole process. What kind of level can we effectively cost share with producers on and still be mindful of our taxpayers? Like I said a few minutes ago, we're definitely going to be looking for all kinds of sources of funding to try to make soil sampling and other best management practices more available to you through cost share. Oh, in your folder, Caroline just pointed out, there are some applications for soil sampling in there if you have done that or planning to do that. It can be filled out and brought into the office. Any other questions for me?
How soon will you release the draft rules, because growers and retailers need time to plan ahead?
So the allocation period will be ending in October of '24. Because we will be opening our district rules and regulations at that time, which we normally do every 5 years, and make revisions or edits or anything that hasn't been working or hasn't been working well or whatever, we'll be looking at those rules and regulations throughout this year. Those regulations would probably go into effect in October, but we are working on a plan to try to allow an adjustment time. So anything that is really heavy, if that becomes a rule, there would obviously be some time for adjustment. We would need to do that. It's only fair to you all as producers. Plus it gives us a little more time to kind of get things put together on our end as well. Other questions? Well, I hope the day has been,
How are test wells tested? Are they ran for a certain time and then tested, or tested static water?
so the question was what is our sampling protocol? Is kind of what it boils down to. So we do have a sampling protocol. Each one of those monitoring wells is sampled. They are pumped or purged for 15 minutes, which would allow that time for fresh water to come into the well. Once all our parameters have been steadied through our monitoring, then the sample is drawn. So there's a complete protocol on how we test and sample that groundwater. Those samples are then brought back to the office. They are chilled. They are chilled from the time that they are drawn to the time they are sent, and those results probably come back in the next few days. So yes, we do have a complete protocol. If you want to know exactly what that is, I can certainly get that to you. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming today. I hope you enjoyed your day. We'll be sending a newsletter in June, so you'll get more information through it. Kyle and her staff we're sending out every other month a newsletter regarding nutrients and nitrogen. So please watch your mailbox, and again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to come and see me.
That was disaster.
I just want to thank everybody for coming here today to the symposium. You are by far our #1 resource as producers. And I want to thank Scott for putting on this program. Him and his staff have spent numerous hours planning this and getting it all together. So we get a round of applause for them.
If you'd like to take your centerpiece home, Galvan told me you can do that.
Oh.